Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we are reviewing one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time, Pyramids of Mars. And we're going to be looking at the new Tales of the TARDIS edition, which of course is an omnibus cut, which is not the first time that Pyramids has gotten the omnibus treatment. It also had one back in 1976, which was about a 60-minute cut, which actually got 13.7 million views at the time, which was the highest viewing figures the show had ever reached up to that point, and a record that would stay intact until City of Death came out 3 years later. City of Death, of course, still holds the record for the largest viewing figures for an episode of Doctor Who, with episode 4 having 16.1 million views. Now, this is a new cut, and it's around 75 minutes, including the bookending part, so about 71, 72 minutes, I think, total for the actual episode. It has, I believe the video sections have been given a more film look, a more filmized look, so it looks more like it was shot on film to blend in with the location work. That works really well. Although it's one of those things where if I didn't know it, I don't know if I would have noticed it, but it does look good. The videotape sections look really good. And of course, it has gotten updated special effects. And if you watch my channel a lot, you know Prowl likes him some updated effects. I love updated effects, and these are some good updated effects. I mean, they're not all over the place, or if they are, I just don't notice them, but the ones we get are really good. Now, one, I like this edit. My favorite version of Pyramids will probably be the full version of Pyramids. I tend to prefer the full versions over omnibuses in general, while still enjoying most of the omnibuses, just as a different way to watch a story. This one runs really well. I like how they mix, like they'll take two separate scenes and have them kind of intercutting with dialogue from one scene going over it, much like when the Doctor's disabling the force field and Sutekh is talking with Scarman. They intercut that really well. That happens a couple times. Again, the grading looks really good. I love the remaster they did here. I'm really hoping this will be on the Season 13 collection box set when it comes out, and hopefully maybe even on the Season 1 box set when that comes out, the Series 14 Season 1 season set when it comes out. I did enjoy that a lot. The new updated effects, I think the main one, of course, is the time corridor, which they've remade in the time vortex because Russell T Davies doesn't understand the story, apparently. Apparently, Russell T Davies thinks that Sutekh gets trapped in the time vortex, which is actually not what happened in the story. He gets trapped in a time tunnel, a time corridor, which is not the time vortex, but Russell T Davies doesn't care about canon at all. I think he's just lazy and doesn't like doing research. Because, or maybe he just doesn't know how to use Google. Either way, he totally gets that one wrong. But who knows, maybe it's one of those things where the Time Lord changed stuff, or that go-to quote that we're always going to hear where the toy maker, I made a jigsaw of your past, I hope you liked it. And maybe it changed things. You know, the original version we see, it was a corridor, but in the new version, that's how history changed. Because the version that we see in Empire of Death in the little flashbacks is with the updated special effects, not the original effects. That's interesting to note. But the updated corridor effect, or time vortex effect, looks nice. It looks nice on the pyramid when we see people going in and out of it. That looks really good. I love the fact they added a little bit of effect when people are running into the force field. It's a little blur effect. That's really nice. I tend to not like when force fields are just there and they don't do anything. I don't know why. I just love them to do a little something. Like in Human Nature and the Family of Blood, when you get the little green. I love that. I don't know why, but I love that. So I like the fact they added a little blur effect when they're doing the force field thing. And to be honest, those are the main two effects I can think of. I know they added that wonderful shot of the pyramids at the beginning, that wonderful shot of Mars at one point. But to me, it's not a whole lot of new effects. The new effect of Sutekh when he's coming through at the end, it looks like they made the head look a little cleaner. It doesn't look quite as CSO bad, because I always liked Sutekh's design with the helmet, but I never quite liked the jackal head. But for some reason, it just looks a little cleaner, like they touched it up a little, to where it actually looks a little more believable, and I did appreciate that. As for the story, though, it's phenomenal. I love Pyramids of Mars. When I was ranking classic Doctor Who, I did a 6-video series ranking all of classic Doctor Who. It was number 2 on the list. Number 2. Almost tied with number 1, which is, of course, City of Death. I just feel like Tom Baker is on his A game which, I mean, I feel like Tom's almost always on his A game, but he's just so good. This episode is a perfect example of why he's the GOAT. And he is. I think Tom Baker is, not only is he my favorite Doctor, I would argue he's objectively the best. But it's really hard to explain, because that's going to come down to what you see as traits that make the Doctor, and that could vary from person to person. But Tom Baker encompasses all of the things that I like to see in a good Doctor. And that probably stems from him. I mean, him and John were two of my first Doctors, even though I learned about multiple Doctors early on in life. I've been a Doctor Who fan since I was 3 or 4 years old. But like all of the things that other Doctors do really well to make them good Doctors, Tom Baker does like all of those. Like the best of Capaldi, Tom Baker has. The best of Hartnell, Tom Baker has. The best of Pertwee, Tom Baker has. The best of Tennant, Tom Baker has. I feel like he encompasses all of these different things, sometimes in different stories, but he does all of them well, and I love that. He's so good here. And we have Sarah Jane, who's, of course, my favorite companion. I love Liz Sladen as Sarah Jane, and I love the rapport between them. They're my favorite TARDIS team, because I feel like Elizabeth and Tom have really good chemistry, and it's easy to tell they got on really well. But I feel like the Fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane have such good chemistry. The little things they do together. I love the scene. It's actually cut out of this version, but it's in the full version. When he's doing one of the puzzles and he's worried it might go wrong, and he kind of subtly puts Sarah behind him so she won't get hurt. And when it turns out to be the right choice, she kind of pats him on the shoulder. Little things like that. I love the scene, and I'm so glad they kept it in. Toward the end, when they turn the corner and the mummy's there and they immediately turn around and walk back, they just... I love that. And the fact that Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen improv that themselves, I love that, because that's such a Doctor thing to do, especially the Fourth Doctor. Those are the reasons why I love him. I mean, well, one of them. I have many. I love the scene when they're trying to get the explosive gel, and she tosses it down to him, and he's, ha! And he explains to her it's highly explosive. You know, the slightest sneeze could set it off. And then he asked about the detonators, and they don't see any, and she looks back and goes, maybe he sneezed, and Tom just gives her that. I just love the rapport between them. I mean, also, we have a story that's basically a page 1 rewrite from the greatest writer the show has ever had, Robert Holmes. If you watch my channel, you know I love Bob Holmes. He just writes dialogue so well. And I love the fact that he doesn't shy away from doing dark things. Matter of fact, I think Robert Holmes likes writing dark stories. Keep in mind, he also wrote The Caves of Androzani and put the Fifth Doctor through all sorts of stuff. But I love how dark the story is. And so much, you know, I've heard a couple of people who have gone back and watched Pyramids of Mars who've never seen it. People who don't watch classic Doctors, some of these, you know, people on YouTube who do reactions who don't really do they don't really know much about classic Who. And they talk about how, or people on Twitter who are like, well, I was a little underwhelmed. I wasn't really sold on Sutekh. I thought he was supposed to be a bigger bad. And I'm sitting here going, you weren't paying attention. You obviously were drifting off because, I don't know, maybe the pacing wasn't right for you, which is ridiculous because this thing's paced, the original version of Pyramids is paced better than Empire of Death, which has pacing issues all over the place. The scene with the spoon and the girl, you can cut that out completely. Doesn't even need to be there. That's 5 to 10 minutes of nothing. That's bad pacing. Pyramids of Mars, no bad pacing. Even this edit, no bad pacing. And so I see people talking about how, well, we don't understand. Sutekh does he not do a lot? I'm like, he's literally controlling a corpse. Sometimes on another planet. He is containing an explosion with his mind when he is a continent away. And this is him when he's subdued and under a force field with his power neglected. There are two things that sell the threat of Sutekh in Pyramids of Mars. One is Gabriel Wolf's voice. Gabriel Wolf's voice is amazing. That's why they got him back in the modern two-part, in The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, because he is so good in that. He's also really good as the Beast in The Impossible Planet and Satan Pit. Gabriel Wolf, the way he does the voice of Sutekh. And of course, he's also physically playing Sutekh in Pyramids of Mars. Just sells the threat of that character with that whisper. The other part, as I mentioned when I talked about Pyramids recently, is the dialogue. Again, Bob Holmes writes good dialogue. The dialogue in this sells the threat of Sutekh. Listening to the Doctor talk about how deadly Sutekh is, how dangerous Sutekh is, and what he will do if he gets free sells it. If you pay attention and you listen to him talking about he will spread death everywhere, not just this planet, everywhere. And then when he actually takes Sarah to the alternate 1980 and you see it and it's desolate, that is an updated effect as well when they open the door and you see the desolate Earth. I don't really think that needed updating, but the updated effect still looks great. That scene sells, this is what happens if we leave, if we don't stay and stop him. This is 1980 and it's just desolate, barren world, circling a dead sun. I love how they add that, circling a dead sun. And then he's basically, you know, it won't stop here. It will spread everywhere. Tom sells that dialogue and how he explains that even the Time Lords can't stop that. You know, what about the Time Lords? You know, even your lot, even my lot. That even the Time Lords would not be able to stand up to the Time Lords. It tells you in there, the Time Lords who have fought armies, destroyed vampires, all of that stuff could not stand up to Sutekh. It's explained all in the dialogue. And then when you actually meet Sutekh, and he has that wonderful conversation with Tom in part 4, I believe, at the beginning of part 4, and you see that exchange between them, and you listen to Sutekh talk in his dialogue, you know, your evil is my good. I am Sutekh the Destroyer. Where I tread, I leave nothing but dust and darkness. I find that good. The dialogue combined with Gabriel Wolf's voice sells how dangerous he is. And you watch how he even gains control of the Doctor's mind. Not something we see happen very often. And forces the Doctor to do, you know, basically to obey his commands. And the only reason Sutekh loses is because his hubris and his arrogance. And the fact he thinks the Doctor is so far beneath him that he lets him go. And the Doctor is able to live when Sutekh thinks he's killed him. Also, the performance, I have to admit, of the guest cast is great. Not just Gabriel Wolf, who is fantastic, but the guy playing Professor Scarman is fantastic. The guy, and of course, Michael Sheard playing Lawrence is great. And even the guy playing Warlock is good. We don't get a lot of him, but he's good. I liked him. The mummies are a little naffed, I'll admit. I'm not the biggest fan of the mummies. They're a little naffed, but it's fine. It's a minor quibble. The location work looks really good, I might add. And I absolutely love how they do not only the makeup on the guy playing Scarman, but his performance. You really get the sense that this is a walking corpse. And a part of that is the performance. And the scene when he gets shot and the smoke goes back in, I can't name a single thing in Empire of Death that impresses me more than that shot. Even though it has a bigger budget, even though it has better special effects, nothing tops that, especially when I'm keeping in mind that they had to do that with the technology at the time, and they had to do that with their budget. The fact that they had to do that whole scene backwards, and the fact that it's not just a quick shot away when you see it go back in, because all of this, of course, had to be shot in reverse, but they included the bit when he walks to the window in that same shot, so you know he had to do that walking backwards in real life. And then so when it played in reverse, he would be walking forward. That's a wonderful shot. That's an impressive shot. That impresses me more than any special effects shot in Empire of Death. Another thing about Empire of Death, you look at the scene in Empire of Death when everybody's getting killed and they're getting dusted, you know, basically the MCU dusting effect. And I hate to compare it to that because it makes sense for the way they're dying, them being turned into dust. It makes sense that that's how Sutekh would kill people, them turning into dust. It's like, it makes sense for the character, but we're so used to seeing that effect ever since Infinity War did it that it doesn't impress as much anymore. And it doesn't even look like people die painfully. They get touched and shh, quick. It doesn't even look like they suffer. Now you compare that with the cliffhanger for episode 1 of Pyramids, when Sutekh's servant steps out of the portal and then kills the guy with the fedora on. When he goes, I bring Sutekh's gift of death. And he puts his hands on him. You see the smoke coming up and you hear the guy screaming before he falls over. Which one of those seems more painful and excruciating? Yeah, the Pyramids cliffhanger sells it way better to me. Because everybody else, oh, we turn into CGI dust. Well, again, fitting for Sutekh. It doesn't look like they suffer. They just die. Where in Pyramids of Mars, that guy looks like he suffered. That looks like a terrible way to go. And then you see, you know, a lot of other people getting choked out to death. Like, we don't actually see Lawrence get killed, but I'm sure it was a horrific death, especially knowing it was his brother killing him. It happens off screen, but just, you know, you think about it in your mind and you're like, what? Ooh, that's terrible. That's terrible. There's just so many good moments, so many good characters. Everything comes together well. And the way the Doctor wins at the end. I love the fact, I remember in Empire of Death, I'm so glad I saw this after Empire of Death, because I lived in the States. I couldn't watch it naturally. One of my subscribers was just very clever, let us say. And but he wasn't able to get to where he could get it to where I could see it until after Empire of Death. So I watched Empire of Death, which was hugely disappointing, very underwhelming. I talked about that in my review for it. Definitely did not live up to what Part 1 set up, which is par for the course practically with modern Who two-parters. Part 2 seldom living up to Part 1. I watched Pyramids of Mars afterwards, and it just reminded me how good Pyramids of Mars is and how much better Pyramids of Mars is. I love that this Doctor isn't screaming at the void, upset, not knowing what to do, feeling lost. I hated the book ending scenes of this edit, by the way, with the Shooty and Millie. Nothing against them. Their performances are fine, but just the dialogue of the Doctor not knowing what to do and just feeling lost. I'm like, this isn't the Doctor. And I remember commenting when the Doctor was screaming into the void in that one shot that we saw in the trailers in Empire of Death. In my actual reaction I filmed for my patrons, I'm sitting there going, if Tom was here, he wouldn't be doing that. The gears would be turning in Tom's head. He would be figuring out a way to fix it. Other doctors would be trying to work out a way to fix it. That's what Tom Baker does. He would be, you'd see the gears turning. He'd have that faraway stare he gets when he's looking at the camera, not looking at anyone else, and you can just see his thought process. He's trying to figure out how to win. Because Tom's very good at doing that. I've talked about this in videos before. I know my Planet of Evil reviews, I tend to mention it because he gets that faraway stare in that one shot. He does that in Pyramids of Mars when Lawrence is talking to him and he's saying that thing about someone is messing with time and time is my business. And you see, he's not looking at Lawrence. He's looking away. He's not even blinking. And when Lawrence asks who he is, he doesn't even answer because the Doctor is so lost in thought, trying to figure out what's going on, putting all the pieces of together, knowing that it's something major. He just doesn't know what yet. That is the Doctor. That is the Doctor. Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor seldom feels out of control in this story. He always feels like he has a grasp on what he needs to be doing. Not always, like when he gets mind controlled, but, and even when he went to distract Sutekh so the missile would blow up, I'm sure he knew he was not going to be in good shape, that he was potentially sacrificing his life. He did it anyway, because he's the Doctor. But he still felt like he knew what he was getting into. Even though he was concerned, he was worried. And then the scene, I like the fact, the scene when they find Lawrence dead, and the Doctor just kind of shoves his body out of the way callously. Not because he doesn't care, but because he has the death of millions on his mind. And Sarah says something to that about, death has just occurred and you don't even seem to care. And then he reminds her, he goes, 4 deaths, 5 if you count the Professor himself. And he explains to her he doesn't have time to deal with that because he has the death, he has all of the lives on the planet he has to think about. I love the fact that he's having to shelve all of that and focus on the problem at hand, or else more people die. Much like Peter Capaldi tells Bill in Thin Ice, if he worries about that, then more people die. I love that. That is the Doctor for me, and why I love Tom Baker so much. One of many reasons. Pyramids just never falls apart for me anywhere. Everything holds up, even on a rewatch. I loved this edit. I hope it's on the season 13 box set. I would love to see the original 60-minute edit of it that aired back in the 70s. I figure that'll be on there too. But this was a great watch, and it really just reminded me sometimes how that classic Who, just from a narrative standpoint, could do it better than modern Who at times. I feel like Russell's really good at writing family drama and emotional characters. I don't think he's necessarily good at storytelling plot or the story narrative. Does that make sense? And I think that's why it fumbles. He's really good at doing emotions and dynamics with people, but I don't think he's actually good at his story-driven plots sometimes. Maybe that's just me. His finales especially, I think, suffer from that. Whereas Robert Holmes was just very good at writing in general. So I want to know what you think of this new version of Pyramids from Mars. Comment down below and let me know. Other things to do. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support what I do. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. A link to my Patreon is down in the description below. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. A link to my Amazon wish list is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wish list is also down there. And most importantly, thank you for watching.